Welcome, MFL astronauts. That's right. You heard it here first. We're on the Fantasy Football Universe Live, and we are talking about the greatest position of all time, and that's the tight ends. How you feeling about this rookie class, Jeremy? You excited? What are we thinking about these rookie tight ends?
Yeah, it's a whole bucket of meh after a couple guys, but there's at least two guys, certainly the top one. But I think for us, I'm not going to speak for you, but for a couple of us here at the FFU, there's a top two. And there might even be a third or fourth guy that we don't absolutely hate in this class. But it's really all going to depend where they land, right? At least it's not as terrible as the RB class is supposed to be coming out. So.
Well, yeah, at least they got the Bowers. We got the Bowers, so we got that going for us. Outside of that, it's kind of like you talk about. I know we both have a guy we like who is our tight end too. We'll talk about him a little bit. And then there's Sanders, and then there's the Rascore, all that fun stuff. But let's jump into this tight end class. What do you say? We will kick it off with the one, the only, quite possibly the greatest tight end prospect of all time. That's Mr. Brock Bowers. Comes in 6'3", 240. He's a little undersized, but boy, he's a do-it-all tight end. He's actually a pretty good blocker for his size. He's a guy you can use underneath. You can use intermediate. You can use him deep. He actually, the way they set him up for success is like they turned him into the screen guy, and they had Ladd working deeper, which was a very interesting decision, but that just shows you how much of an athlete this guy is and what he could do for Georgia. So why don't you give us the rundown on Bowers and why he's our basically tight end one and pretty much the tight end one in Dynasty when he gets drafted?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is I wish we got an opportunity, just like kind of a lot of the top guys in this draft. I wish we got an opportunity to see him test completely, right? Wanted to see him run that 40, wanted to see the agility, but you don't need to. You see everything that you need to see on tape, right? The way he was utilized at Georgia from the jump. He's just been fantastic. He's a great receiver of the football with awesome hands. This guy's an athlete, pure and simple. He's quick. The tape, he just pops every time you see him. Super awesome at the catch point, strong, high points the football, runs like an animal. He looks like, and I've heard this comp a little bit, and I think this is why he kind of looks like George Kittle when he's running with the football, right? He's just got this it's just aesthetically looks like him. I'm not going to comp him to Kittle, but he can do it all. And if he lands somewhere like the New York Jets or the Los Angeles Chargers, that's going to be really exciting for fantasy. We're hoping for that. Hopefully it's not somewhere where he's buried for a year or two, but far and away the tight end one in this class for sure.
Yeah, and like the Kittle thing's actually, it makes a lot of sense because Kittle is a do-it-all tight end. I know everyone's loved Kelsey, and like he's closer to Rob Gronkowski than he is Kelsey. And in fact, like he's an absolute hammer of a blocker. He's a yak guy. He basically almost led the league in receiving yards one year, like back like 2018, I think it was. Like that's how good Kittle was because he's a freak athlete and do it all. Bowers offers a lot of the similar traits. He's a little bit undersized as well, plus blocker, but like he's a weapon. So I think it really gets interesting because he falls to our 108, and it seems like he's the guy of the top 8 that seems to continually fall because we can't really pick him in the right spot. We don't know how it's going to go. Because he plays a tight end position, I still think there's some PTSD from Kyle Pitts and all of that fun stuff. The difference with like him and Pitts is his production profile is better. Pitts was more of a freakier version of this because he's like 6'6". He's like the guy that ran a 4.4 40. Like he's the true unicorn. Yep. Bowers is the guy that's just overall like he checks all the boxes you're looking for. So I think it's kind of a different case, but I don't think you have to put him at X and outside like Atlanta did. You can use him inside, you can slot him out, you can move him all over the field, but you can actually treat this guy like a more traditional tight end. So I don't think he's as situation dependent as Kyle Pitts was, but if we look back a couple years ago, I was like drooling over Kyle Pitts. I was like, oh baby, Kyle Pitts, you know what I'm saying? So it's interesting, but overall, like I love Brock Bowers. And if you're at the 108 and he's falling to you, absolutely just smash draft him. Don't get cute with it. Don't take, Xavier Worthy or whatever, like wide receiver, right? Like take Brock Bowers. He's that good, and he's a truly special talent. So I think it's a gift.
Quick question for you about Bowers, because we're talking about kind of just straight PPR leagues, but when we get into tight end premium leagues, if it's you get an extra half point or sometimes an extra full point, or if you get like a half point per first down, like where are you? I know you're a big Rome guy, but where are you looking to take Bowers if the tight end premium is excessive?
If it's excessive, you could talk so I have him in that tier 2, like it's Caleb Williams, and then it's basically 102 through 107. If you want to get bold and say it's like a 10 team, and we'll get a little bit league specific and into the weeds. So if it's like a 10 team where like quarterback's kind of devalued because all the elite, it's really hard to get an elite guy. You could talk yourself into Bowers in 102 if you really, really want to go for it. But that would be more of like a league that has bonuses for catches and yards on top of it. Like the PPR bonus, that's where Bowers is going to succeed. So yeah, you can talk yourself into it. Realistically, probably 104 is where I would push him. It's just, depends on what you're looking for. I have a really hard time putting him above the wide receivers in this class. That's what I'm more struggling with at the moment. Where would you put him? Say it's like, a 2-point tight end premium, or maybe it's a start 2 tight end premium, however you want to phrase it. Like where are you comfortable taking Bowers?
Yeah, so in a regular PPR right now, I agree he's my 108. Rome has whether it's the Jesse Moeller effect or just the everybody else talking about the Rome Odunze effect and how awesome he's been in the tape and everything. He's above Bowers for me right now. If you're talking about a 2-point, an extra point per reception for tight ends, you may need a tight end, you may not. It doesn't matter. If Bowers lands in an awesome spot, I mean, you're talking about, like you said, the 104, the 105 is probably a really interesting spot because certainly I would put him over Rome at that point. And then, it's going to depend where these quarterbacks go. But I mean, outside of Caleb Williams, I mean, you can just start talking about all 3 receivers and Brock Bowers in that sort of scenario, especially if we get, Washington, New England landing spots as we're expecting for some of these top QBs.
Yeah, that might be a little bit rough. Like there's some things there with Washington talking about the Patriots, man. It's tough. I know you're a Patriots fan, so I'm sorry, but like, hopefully they figure it out this year. They let Jacoby Brisket do his thing. You rest the guy, and then you go in the following year. It could happen, but yeah, Bowers is just like the thing I want to get across with Bowers. He's just a special player, and whenever you have a chance to draft special players who are truly like the elite range of outcomes, you smash draft them. So like him falling to the 107, 108 range, I think that's a gift because we talked about this like last year. We're like, oh my God, Brock Bowers is coming. Like he's the guy everyone was excited for. Now we're here. He's kind of fallen because we can't really place him in the right spot. So if you're in that back half of your first round, like you're at the 107, 108, you're right there. It's like, all right, you don't really need to trade up. One of these truly elite guys is going to fall to you. Just be there. Just enjoy it. See what happens. Maybe you get a Rome Odunze, maybe you get a Brock Bowers, maybe you get a Drake May who falls. Like it's just a great spot to be in draft. So like overall, I love that.
And one more thing I'll add here is last year, right? It was Kincaid over Laporta. That was pretty much consensus, but we just saw the perfect storm for Laporta there, who just absolutely dominated, became the tight end 1 all across all formats, and is now currently the dynasty tight end 1 by, I think, anyone's consensus. He's just landed in the perfect spot, mixed with the talent. Brock Bowers, if he doesn't land in the perfect spot, he could be Kyle Pitts, but Kyle Pitts was still productive, still retains value year over year. So if you're getting this guy at the 106, 107, 108, I still think that's a smash. He's going to retain his value at worst. At best, he could be a top 3 tight end in year 1.
Well, that's the thing, especially with these elite tight ends. The insulation is there, unless they're truly terrible. Like we even have it where Kincaid. Like Kincaid did not have a great rookie season. It was very good as far as historical context, but compared to Laporta, it's not the same thing, right? So everyone's like, oh, he struggled. It's like, yeah, he had like the 6th most receiving yard, like as a rookie since 2000, something absurd. Like he was good, but people kind of discounting him. I think with Bowers, as long as he has a good quarterback, that's all I care about. Like that's the only thing I care about. The rest will kind of work itself out. Just give him a capable quarterback. Don't give me the Kenny Pickett's of the world. Nothing like that where you're like, oh, this guy can't get him the ball, and then it's gonna struggle. Outside of that, like I really don't care. So wherever he lands, like maybe he goes to Cincinnati, whatever he falls, right? Or Indianapolis could be really fun. I think there's a lot of fun landing spots for Bowers where he's just a weapon, and the team that has him, if it's like like we talk about McDaniel or Shane Steichen, those guys that know how to use like their weapons, like if you put him in that offense and you let him cook, it's like could be really fun to watch. So I'm just overall really excited for Brock Bowers. All right, let's jump to our number 2, who I know is your guy in the class and who's kind of my guy too. It's Ben Sinnott. For me, didn't really know much about him going into the process, and then I was like watching the tape, and I was like, the snow game. If you just want to watch the tape, go watch him in the snow game. He looks like a freaking juggernaut, where he's absolutely just dumpster trucking dudes. He's having the time of his life making catches, and I was like, who the F is this guy? And I was like, all right, so I got to dig into his profile, and I was like, yeah, man, he's big enough. Like he checks everything you want. You'll look at our rankings of where we have him. It's like 306. It's just like, I know people are not that excited, and like this tight end class, this more gets into it. It's kind of pick your guy. You could talk to him in the second round. Like I know you do that, but this is kind of where he falls in our rookie draft just because it's like, we love the wide receivers and then it's the tight ends. why don't you sell us on Ben Sinnott and like why he's our number tight end 2 and like why we both like him so much?
He's such a good receiver. Number one. All right. The guy absolutely runs like nice, precise routes. He's out there cooking safeties, even like slot DBs. Go ahead and, fire up the Senior Bowl practice tape. This guy's putting on an absolute clinic. Looked really good at the combine as well, just receiving football. But really what it is, it's the tape. The guy is just routinely skying over defenders, high pointing the football, strong hands all over the place, making himself a big target available for his quarterback. Like the guy can do it all. And, I'm not necessarily going to say he does it better than Brock Bowers, but more so than a lot of these other guys who are good receiving threats. Sinnott can block, right? They put him in the backfield sometime as well. So Kansas State was doing everything they could to utilize this guy, both as a blocker and a receiver. He's a do-it-all guy, and that's, I think, why for me and for a lot of us, he's our clear tight end 2, because some of these other tight ends in this class are not do-it-all guys. They're a receiver. There's a few of them who are just massive bodies who are blockers, right? But a lot of these guys are receivers. Sinnott can do it all. He's lined up all over the field. And he's quick for a tight end as well. I think he had the number 3 RAS of all tight ends in this class, right? Another guy we're going to talk about, Theo Johnson, was at the top. But if you compare Theo Johnson to Ben Sinnott, right, Sinnott just blows him away in terms of all-around receiving ability. So for me, it's Ben Sinnott by a large margin here. And I actually went as far as to separate Bowers into his own tier and then Sinnott in his own tier at the tight end 2. And then it's kind of the other guys for me. So if I can't get Bowers in the middle of the first, Sinnott at the beginning of the third, like you said, even the late second, I think he's going to be available for you there. If you're tight end needy, if it's tight end premium, even if it isn't, right, go ahead and feel free to smash that button on Ben Sinnott after some of those sure things at around the middle of the second are all off the board.
Yeah. And what I was curious to see is the combine, how he did with like his RAS score. He was like, he had a 40-inch vertical, like a 10+ broad jump. You put that into context, like that's a 949 RAS score. That's a very high score. So for me, if I'm looking for tight ends, I'm looking for athletic upside with production. Like that's the ultimate goal. Obviously, we didn't get it with Bowers because let's be real, he didn't need to test. Like that's how good of a prospect Brock Bowers is. He's like, yeah, I'm good. And he's also dealing with the ankle injury. Like he hurt his ankle last year, so he wasn't going to test anyways. What we got with Sinnott was kind of the guy that's a late riser where it's like, oh, okay. Like you see the tape and you're like, yeah, this guy could do a lot of good things. They move him all over the field, like you talk about. He's a good receiver. And then you go see the testing and you're like, all right, there's the athleticism, because we notice how correlated athleticism is to fantasy production for tight ends. So he kind of checks all the boxes. And that's where I'm at. He's more tight end 2 by default. I personally have Sanders as number 3, but those two guys are together for me just because the Sanders is learning the position. We'll get to him in a little bit. But yeah, both of these guys in tier 2 at tight ends, I like a lot. I like a lot what they can bring to the field. And he's less landing spot dependent than we'll talk about Sanders or these other guys, right? Because he can step on the field. I think he played inline. He played H-back for Kansas State. Like he did all of that stuff, right? So I think he'll fit in just well. And I'm excited to see where he goes. And hopefully he goes day 2. He gets a decent spot. Even if it's behind a guy for a year, he slowly comes on and, he just earns it. So he's a guy that I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant in year 1. Maybe it's possible. Who knows? We'll see. But it's a guy you want to at least like draft and you store by your tackling squad and you kind of just wait. And he'll get the opportunity, and I think he'll be very good in the NFL when that happens because the baseline is there for him to be a productive like tight end in the NFL for a long time, I think.
Yeah. And, we've been on Ben Sinnott probably because we just started before a lot of other people who are like January playoffs, like, let's go crunch the tape, right? Fantasy is over. But we've been on Sinnott for months because we've all watched the tape. We've all loved this. And now you start to hear everybody who's coming back in and grinding the tape is like, oh, I really like Ben Sinnott. Oh, I really like Ben Sinnott. Oh, he did this. Oh, he did this. And now he's becoming this consensus tight end 2 above guys like Jatavian Sanders, who was there, but then just kind of fell off a cliff throughout the process, especially at the combine. And Sinnott just continues to rise. So I don't know that many people are sleeping on him anymore, but I'm going to tell you that this guy, regardless of landing spot, is going to make it in the NFL. He's going to stick somewhere in the team that draft, especially if he goes day 2, right? 4th round, okay. But especially if he goes day 2, like all aboard the Ben Sinnott hype train. You could convince me middle of the 2nd round to pick him in just a straight PPR league, right? After, the Pearsalls and I'm trying to think who's in that range, after like maybe the top 3 or 4 running backs are off the board, right? And you're looking at kind of that 4th tier of wide receiver or tight end 2, you could convince me Ben Sinnott at the 205, 206 landing spot dependent.
Yeah, I think the consensus, like a lot of people still have Sanders above him, Jatavion Sanders, because he was kind of a guy that everybody's hyped about. For us, like once we dove into it, it's like, all right, yeah, like we much prefer him. He doesn't need as much to go right for him to succeed, is the best way I'll phrase it. As with Sanders, it's like, all right, you're going on that Evan Ingram role. Like it's a lot harder. Like you need, and it's kind of Bowers to a point. That's just because we're chasing the upside with him. But like you need a coach who knows how to use his talents and set him up to succeed. That doesn't always happen. Like not everyone gets these dream landing spots like Miami, or we talk about Indianapolis, right? Sometimes you're just stuck with a coach that doesn't know how to use you. And it's like, all right, you have to succeed. So like, I think in this case, he gives you a higher floor and a very comparable ceiling. Like I think he could be like a low end fantasy tight end 1 for years to come, as long as, he's just starting tight end, and we'll see how it goes for him. But he's done everything right up into the process. Like I think he's going to be drafted. And once he gets drafted, he'll comfortably probably slide in that late 2nd range, especially in tight end premium leagues. We talk about maybe mid-2nd, depending on people feel. And this is where kind of like we talked about this last year with Laporta. He was the guy that fell just because people were all about Kincaid and his landing spot. Little do we know, Jared Goff, like he loves the middle of the field, and that's where Laporta was successful all season. He's like, yeah, I'll hook you up, I'll hit you. So I think as long as he has a capable quarterback, we talk about, like, be fine. You draft him mid-2nd, you'll get a guy you'll be very happy with for a long, long time to go. So,
yeah. And there's just two other things I want to say about him. The first is the drumbeat around NFL circles from beat writers is that Ben Sinnott, like the NFL loves him, right? There's plenty of coaches. He's on people's boards. So like at this point, day 2 is almost expected, right? There's a lot of teams who are in love with him according to the beat. So if you believe that, and I think there's enough people saying it, like number 1, that's going to be awesome for his value, especially in fantasy, if the teams are in love with him and are going to plug them into his offense. Number 2, again, go watch the Senior Bowl practice tapes. He is cooking dudes. Like, and you see this on his tape as well. Like the dude will sit in the slot, run a Julian Edelman type option route, cut it off to the corner, and like absolutely cook the corner and be wide open and catch that in the front pylon. Like Ben Sinnott is the real deal. Go watch watch some of his highlights and enjoy.
Yes, 100%. It's interesting enough. Like you on Keep Trade Cut right now, the only 2 rookie tight ends they have there, like Sinnott is not even listed on there. It's just Bowers. No, of course it's Bowers, right? And then it's Jatavion Sanders, and that's more. I think it's the name cachet than anything else. With Jatavion Sanders. Like, well, he's our tight end 3 and actually pretty good. Like, this is a good segue to get into him. We'll jump into him right here, right now. We still like Jatavion Sanders. I just think the difference is his combine was more disappointing because the expectations were so high from him. People were like, oh yeah, because he was the number 1 athlete in his class. He's learned tight end, so like he wasn't a natural tight end. He didn't have a position coming out of high school. Like he wasn't sure what he was going to be. Went to Texas and decided to be a tight end, and that's worked out pretty well for him. It's the issue is this quarterback position. Same thing with, like, we talk about Worthy, we talk about AD Mitchell. Yep. Quinn Ewers sucks, and so it really just limits that offense. And like I mean, I wish Quinn Ewers the best all this year. Hopefully, he turns it around, similar to Drew Allaire, Penn State. Hopefully, they turn around. They get the draft capital next year. All of them, but where he's at right now, it limited these guys, all 3 of them. Like Santana's, he's a good receiving tight end. And it's just like he ran a 4.68. Sinnott ran a similar 40 time. The difference is like we were not expecting Sinnott to blow it out of the room. Sanders, we were expecting him to, like, people are talking 4.5s, like be a very like difference making athlete. He kind of disappointed. I mean, his RAS score is fine. It's in the 8s. It's not terrible or anything like that. But as you see here, he's 6'4", 245. He's a little bit undersized. That's kind of the thing we get into this tight end class. And we'll talk about the next guy. He's definitely the opposite of that. He's a monster. He's a full-grown monster. But these big 3, they're a little bit undersized, so it is a little bit knock on them. But this is the more thing with Sanders. He's just not a good blocker on top of it too. So like you add that together, it just makes it harder for him to succeed. So I think the floor is lower with Sanders, where he could end up into a team and they don't know how to use him. I think that's a disaster scenario because you're just looking at him like, dude, this guy is the good receiving option. Like, figure out a way to get him on the field and a team can't do it. And sometimes we see this with these receiving tight ends like that are undersized. It's just difficult for them to succeed. There is the Everett Ingrams of the world that happens, but that's not always the case with these guys. The difference was Everett Ingram was a first round pick. No one's expecting Sanders to be a first round pick. So when you're looking at Sanders, kind of what's the things that you like about his game that you think could translate to the NFL?
Yeah, he is athletic with the ball in his hand, right? I mean, I agree with you. The RAS, he was the 8th tight end in terms of total RAS, that's relative athletic score, at the combine. But at the same time, he's able to catch the ball pretty well. I wish his hands were a little bit better, but he's certainly a capable wide receiver. He can run a decent route, right? He's not blowing guys away either with his route running. But I think overall, get the guy, and this is what Texas did, get the guy the ball as soon as possible and let him just run wild in the secondary, right? The yak ability with his athleticism and just his size is overpowering, and he can absolutely be a weapon for NFL team. To me, it almost feels a little bit, I don't think he's as good a route runner and certainly not as polished, but almost like an Isaiah Likely type build when Likely is kind of split out. Right. I don't think he certainly doesn't have the blocking chops. And this is what really bothers me about Sanders and kind of his fit in an NFL team. He's not a blocking tight end. Right. So if he's in a situation where he's the Isaiah Likely to a healthy Mark Andrews, who's already in line. Right. If that's the case and he can work his way on the field, great. I just think that those sort of situations on NFL teams and in offenses are few and far between. And, for me, it's unlikely that he's going to be a starting tight end immediately. It's going to take this guy a while. Like you said, he still needs to develop. He's a converted tight end. He still needs to develop at that size, figure out how to block, get his feet in the right position, right, and do everything a tight end needs to do.
Yeah. I mean, his production profile is not bad. He had back-to-back 600-yard receiving seasons in 2022, 2023. But like with 2021, it took him a year to figure it out because, like we said, he wasn't a tight end going in. He learned the position, and he was productive. So it's not like he's a bad weapon. And he was like pushing down the field. He averaged 15 yards a catch last year. So like there is some good stuff he could do. But to your point, I'm with you. Like you want to get him the ball and let him be a playmaker because he's not long-term fast. He's more just like short area quickness fast. So like that's what we mean by like, you do some screens underneath stuff with him. Like you can make that work. So I think if a team knows how to use him and he goes to a good offensive good quarterback, I'll be much more interested. I just think, like we talk about this going to him, he's very landing spot dependent. And you look on certain like websites, we use Mock Draft Database and NFL Draft Buzz. The guys they comp him to, I think, is a little bit bold. You hear the Michael Mayers, the Trey McBrides, the Dalton Kincaids. Like the issue is like Kincaid last year coming out was a far superior like receiver. Like he could actually go all 3 levels, do everything you needed. He ran kind of the full route tree. Sanders is a little bit younger, like Kincaid's 24, 25. Sanders is a little bit younger, so he doesn't have that on his side, which is nice. But yeah, I just think I just need to see a little bit more from him and see his game improve before I'm fully confident in him being a potential difference making receiving tight end. Because I do think maybe he has a higher ceiling than Snot, but I think the floor is much, much lower. So it's just it kind of depends. Pick your poison. Like for me, it's like they're both in that tier 2. I know you said he's below and he's in tier 3. Yeah. But overall, like I like both these guys, and they offer a lot of good and some things that you're not so much like.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. I think the one thing that I'm a bit leery of is his cost in rookie drafts, right? Mm-hmm. At the moment, and I think from the jump at the start of the process, he was going early second, sometimes mid second, and he settled into that mid to late second. You'll still see a lot of people picking him there if you go and do some mock drafts today with a random sampling of players. We see these here, these values here, the 310 and Superflex, the 308 and Superflex. I think that's where he is valuable. The problem is, will he ever drop that far? I guess it really depends over these next couple of weeks what we hear and where he ultimately falls on an NFL team and how we project that offense to look. But I think it's more likely that he ends up being drafted by a team with a tight end in place. Maybe like San Francisco seems like a reasonable spot. I know they just brought somebody else in. I can't remember who it was behind Kittle, but somewhere where the tight end is old enough where he'll age out in a couple of years, and then Sanders can presumably do his best to kind of model his game, learn, and then step into that role when he's ready.
Yeah, I think it's Cameron Latu that they just brought in San Francisco as the guy, because it's like looking at their roster right now, it's Latu, it's Braden Willis, it's Jake Tongs, and I don't even know who Jake Tongs is. So I'm assuming it's Latu, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I think to your point, like Sanders would do good to be behind, like, and maybe Evan Ingram and Jacksonville. It's another good spot where you can learn the position and you develop. I think it's more of a long-term project with him, and we'll. Our fourth guy is very much the same thing. Like, he's just a Raz monster, and it's it's a landing spot dependent situation. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm on NFL Draft Buzz right now, and he's the tight end too, and it's more Phil's by default because people know his name. He went to Texas. They were in the Final Four. They kind of had that name cachet, and then people recognize him. So I think once it sorts itself out, don't be surprised if Sanat like passes him in rankings, because I think that's entirely possible and could happen. But at the moment, like you talk about, just like somebody who's doing rookie drafts for the first couple of times, like, oh, I know the name Sanders, and they'll see the rest of the guys like they don't know the other guys outside of that. So I think he kind of gets lumped in there by default, and he has the athleticism I hoped he would have. It didn't hit it, so it's just kind of things are working for him. We'll see if it shakes out that way with the draft. It's just entirely dependent upon that.
And one thing I'll say in his favor is, and you brought this up at the jump, right, is that I've been saying it for Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell, is that, we're giving them a bit of a pass because of Quinn Ewers, right? This guy had Quinn Ewers too, as you mentioned. So, is he capable of, becoming the favorite, check down target or underneath target for a much more capable NFL quarterback? It's possible, right? We don't totally know this situation, but from what we saw on tape, it seems to be more an issue of Sanders than an issue of Ewers not using him properly.
100%. I'm right there with you. All right, let's jump into our tight end 4. And I've been kind of hinting at it. I think people know who that is if you've been paying attention to the process. The guy that absolutely tore up the combine. It's Theo Johnson out of Penn State. By the way, there is not a better strength and conditioning program in college football than Penn State. If you want a player to develop and turn into a monster, send him to Penn State. Their strength and conditioning coach has like the evil mustache with a curly Q and everything. It's glorious. Like, they build dudes out of that program. And no surprise, Theo Johnson, 6'6", 260. The dude's a tank. He's one of the best like RAS scores you will see at the tight end position. I think it's a 9.99 or it's like a 10 even. It's right there. We also had this with Zach Kuntz last year, a guy who basically 10 RAS score, did nothing. He didn't even see a snap last year for the Jets. So with Theo Johnson, it's very interesting, and the athleticism upside is tantalizing. The issue is production profile is awful. Like, I'm talking really low. We talk about A.D. Mitchell having a no production profile. No, like Theo Johnson. I think the most receiving yards he had in his season was last year, 341. His most receptions is 34. Like, he had 7 touchdowns, which is good, but like, it's a really bad production profile. And I get it. Similar to Texas, Drew Allaire, another guy, the quarterback there, super hyped, like prospect, one of the most talented quarterbacks you'll find, just struggled last year, and he did not unlock Theo Johnson in that offense. So, like we said, maybe in 2024 it works out for him, but in the meantime, that's what Theo Johnson had to deal with. It's just not there for him. But yeah, he's strictly an upside bet. Like, the way I look at him, you're chasing the athleticism profile at tight ends because it's so correlated. He's the guy of all of them. It's like, all right, I'll swing on the 4th round. I'll take a stab on Theo Johnson. Why don't you sell everybody a little bit on like what's the pros and what's the cons of Theo Johnson?
Here's what I got selling Theo Johnson. He's 6'6". He's 260. He ran a 4.57 40 at the combine. His shuttle time was actually kind of insane. It was 4.19, 3-cone, 7.15. Like, the guy can move. The problem is he's not a phenomenal blocker. You really wish that he would be able to kind of use his size to block off the edge. That would, boost him into elite level for an NFL tight end. It doesn't seem to be there. That can develop. And I think if an NFL team is smart, if they take him in, the 3rd or 4th round, where I assume he's going to go, then really what they need to do is they just need to get him in the offensive line room as soon as possible and just develop him into a blocker, help him with his feet, help him with his hands, just sit him with the offensive line the entire offseason. Eat, drink, and sleep with the offensive line. Because the guy can catch, right? He runs decent routes. Like you said, Drew Aller wasn't doing him any favors. But what we what we need to see out of him is the ability to stay on the field, and that's going to come with blocking. You hope he can, because this guy at his size can absolutely carve out a red zone, package developed completely for him, right? This is almost Jimmy Graham level size for sure, at least. Especially if the Johnny Wilsons of the world don't convert to tight end. This is going to be the guy at the tight end position coming in that really has the ability to carve out that role in short down and distance in the red zone. So for me, Theo Johnson, I don't totally see it. It's why I think he's the tight end 5 on my list. He's our consensus tight end 4. And you just hope he can develop. But really, for me, it's the blocking is an issue.
Yeah, 100%. Like, for as big as he is, you want him to absolutely maul guys and dominate them. They'll get into him and inside, and then he'll just take over for him. And it's like, dude, you're bigger and like stronger than basically everybody you're going against on the field. You should be able to hit yourself as a blocker. So I think that part is where he plays a little bit soft. But on the flip side, he does have like really soft hands. You see that when he translates. So it's like, he's a bigger guy. He's a freak athleticism. You just want him to be able to like channel that strength and like really use that power when he's in line and doing that. There's just, there's holes in his game. And this is why we're talking about him in round 3, round 4, round 5 range, because there's upside and there's also a downside. And you're like hoping whoever gets him, like you're saying, they figure him out. They learn ways to help him out and succeed, because like you don't get guys this big, this fast coming in the league very often. It's tight end. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. So as like a coaching staff with all of their egos that they have, they're like, oh yeah, we could build this guy. We could build him up. And you hope that's the case. And maybe by like 2026, 2027, he's in a situation where he's a productive, he's playing the 80% snap share, he's running all the routes. I just think with him, it's a long-term bet. So you got to be a little bit patient if you draft him. I know people get hyped with the athleticism. We kind of dive into a little too much. The production profile still needs to be there. Like, I love athletic tight ends, but it's like, if you don't produce in college, it's really hard to just all of a sudden come in out of nowhere produce. So we're hoping, and we talk about it. And same thing like we talked about with Ja'Tavion Sanders, like get behind the situation, learn behind a guy, learn how to be a productive pro, and then let your athleticism shine out. So that's just kind of what I think is the bold case with him. I don't know if it's going to happen, but at least you can talk yourself into it, because, we love chasing athletic tight ends. And I just checked. He did have a 10 RAS score. It's like the 10th of all time. There are not more athletic tight ends in the NFL. Like, they just don't exist, right? So you mentioned Jimmy Graham. Yes, this is not old man Jimmy Graham catching touchdowns for the Bears and stuff like that. This is no like Saints, like freak athletic tight end Jimmy Graham. Like, that's the size stuff like we're talking about. Obviously, I don't think he's as smooth as Jimmy Graham. Like, he's not as fluid as he was, because you watch him with the Saints, like that's just a different level athlete. But like the things Theo Johnson can bring to a fielder, like there's a lot of stuff we like. But yeah, I think he's also my tight end 5, if I remember. I need to check my rankings, but because who our tight end 5 is, that's the guy that I'm really bullish on of this group, right? I've been like kind of hyping this guy up. So let's jump to our tight end 5. And that is Cade Stover out of OSU, baby. He's 6'4", 247. He's not as big as Theo Johnson. You see where we have him, late 4th. He's more a dart throw. The thing I like with Stover is he's an absolute dog. And with the issues we had with Theo Johnson, they're not there with Stover. This guy, he was all on like Mr. Michigan coming out. He was a defensive end, and he loved just hitting people. They were talking about interviews. And he's like, yeah, I just love attacking people and going after them. That's never a problem with Stover. He's absolutely going to be a dog for you. So he's going to fight. He passed the athleticism test. The thing is, he just like same thing with Sanders. He was not a tight end coming out. He was more a defensive guy. They moved him around a linebacker, defensive end until they found a spot for him. It was actually his coaching staff that was like, Ryan Day was like, hey, I think you could be a pro level NFL tight end. He's like, okay. So they trusted him in tight ends. He had the breakout game a few years ago, the Rose Bowl, where he was looking very good, being productive. And then the production came in 2 years ago where you kind of see it and you're like, oh, he's a good athlete. He's fluid. He's smooth. Guess what? He's a good blocker too. So he's another guy I didn't know much about, but then I dove into the tape and I saw him and I was like, I like this guy a lot. So he is well below the radar. So that's kind of why he's our tight end 5. It would not shock me to see this guy be a productive NFL tight end. Like, I've been pretty bullish on him. So I'll kind of let you sell the people on it, because like you can tell my bias with this guy. Why don't you kind of sell the people on Cade Stover?
Hey, I'm right there with the bias. He's also my tight end 4. I mean, look, the thing is he's not hyper athletic, right? Mm-hmm. The RAS came in underwhelming, but you also see it on tape, right? He doesn't. He's not a separator like I believe Sinat is, right? He's not Brock Bowers, right? He's not a ridiculous dominant blocker. Like you said, the size is a bit of an issue, but just watch this guy catch the football. Like he's he's hyper athletic in the air, contorting his body, doing whatever he has to do to catch the football. The concentration is absolutely insane. The hands are super strong. And like you said, he just has that mentality. He's an absolute dog getting after it. Like, I really love the way that this guy plays the position. I don't think he's going to be even an average blocker at the next level. And that's going to be his downfall in terms of playing time, getting on the field. But if he can absolutely be a weapon for an NFL team, the problem is, and why he's not at the top of our rankings, is he's likely not going to carve out a third option on an NFL team in the passing game, right? And that's at least what you need for a tight end to be fantasy relevant. You want to see them be the second or first option for those top guys. But yeah, Cade Stover is not going to be that. But you hope that he can take what he has already in his tool bag, develop that over time, and down the line become that. So for me, I'm not jumping in. You see his rankings there in Superflex and 1QB. He's mid to late fourth round. I'm probably going to let him, go. I might pick him up off of waivers after the draft if we have 4 rounds and stash him. But that's what I think he's going to be regardless of where he goes. But he's also a good stash, right? He has a lot of things to build on. And I think an NFL team is going to see that, going to like that, and take a chance on developing him.
Yeah, I think with him it's interesting because his RAS score was like mid-8s. It's fine. It's like good enough is the way I'll phrase it. It's not truly elite freaky stuff. It's not Theo Johnson, right? We're not talking about that. Because like on top of it, he's a little bit undersized. I think he actually came in at 6'3" as opposed to 6'4". So he's just a little bit smaller than you want. But like these guys all kind of run the same range as far as like 40 time. I think he's 4.65. A few of them were 4.68. It's all same range. But yeah, like to your point, I think he's a much more natural athlete. And that shows up in his receiving game, like the things he could do in the short area. He's not going to blow by guys. Like that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about Kyle Pitts out there, but like he's just a natural athlete, and that shows up when you watch him catch the ball and do things. It's like, okay, he's learning the position. He's only been doing it in a few years, so he's more of a developmental guy where maybe the blocking could come in, but like, yeah, it's still a question mark. There are some things with him, but like we talk about, like a coaching staff's going to love this guy because he's the kind of guy you could mold to do whatever you need him to do because he's happily going to do it. So I think he goes to a situation, he probably goes day 3 late or whatever. And he like slowly just earns his role on a team where he just learns behind a guy. The coaching staff falls in love with him because they'll ask him to do anything and he'll do it well, right? They'll be like, all right, do this one thing. He'll learn it once and then go. So yeah, like could he be a top 12 tight end? Sure. Like I don't think he's ever going to get top 5 tight end. Like that's not what we're talking about, right? It's just more, he kind of falls in that range of guys who, given the right situation, the right circumstance, maybe it's, the wide receiver room isn't that great for a year. He can happily get into that range. But I think he's more like a back end, like half, top 15-ish tight end, maybe. We'll see. Yep. But he needs a lot of things to go right. I came away really impressed compared to like when you look in the rankings, he's like really low in rankings. And I was like, interesting. Okay. And then I watched him and I was like, oh, like if I was an NFL coach staff, I'm like, yeah, I want that guy on my roster. Like that's a guy I want and a guy to build the culture with because he's all about football, all of that stuff. So yeah, there's good and bad with him, but 100% with you. He's not like he's my tight end 3. I actually prefer him to Theo Johnson. I just think it's easier with him. But yeah, he's in that 3 to 5 range where it's interchangeable. Like I'm not going to be like, you got to take this guy. Like if you prefer the super freak athletic tight end, go chase it. If you want the other guy, tight end 5, Jatavian Sanders, go for it. Like they all kind of win differently, I think is a good way to phrase it. And they offer different pass upside. So like you could kind of pick and choose. When we talk about with the top 3 wide receivers in this class, kind of similar. It's like you're like, what's your flavor, right? What are you chasing after? Like with Roma Dunze, he's kind of the in between of those two guys. Malik Neighbors is the freak athlete, and then we get to Marvin Harrison Jr. He's just a boundary wide receiver who could just absolutely dominate on this catch over there. So like similar to these tight ends, they all kind of win differently. So in these back half of them, it's just what's your flavor, right? Do you want Theo Johnson, the freak athlete? Do you want Cade Stover, who can kind of is learning the position? Same thing with Jatavian Sanders. I just think Sanders is just a better like route runner at this point. Like Stover doesn't run the full route tree, do all that stuff, but he's just like a natural athlete kind of playing the tight end position. So I think that's the best way I'll phrase it with him. Yeah.
And the one thing I'll say, you mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously teammates with Cade Stover, right? So he's sucking up all of the target volume instead of Stover. You have Egbuka there, who was the number 2 option. Cade Stover is the number 3 option for 2 straight years. So, take that for what it's worth. It hasn't created much production for him. But in the limited times he saw the ball, it was like 35 receptions a year. In the limited times he saw the ball, he did enough with it to pop. And, like I said, just go watch some of the highlight reel tape of this guy. Great concentration, strong hands as a receiver. So landing spot dependent. If he goes somewhere, is able to develop. Again, he's one of these guys I want to see sit behind an established tight end, and then in year 2, preferably year 3, kind of break out. And he's someone in Dynasty. Yeah, I'll take a shot on stashing.
Yeah, he actually was second on the team in receiving yards last year, which was really surprising. But like then you kind of dive into it, it's like, oh yeah, Ibuka was like dealing with an injury. No wonder. But still, to this point, he still was second on the team. The issue is they're like another quarterback situation that was not great last year. This kind of handcuffed Marvin Harrison. Same thing with the rest of those guys on offense. It's like you didn't get to fully see that entire offense go kick to the max, I would say. So, let him in a good quarterback situation. We'll see. But that's kind of our top 5, you could say. Is there anyone outside the top 5 that you think we should bring up or mention, or just kind of just throw the rest away?
No. There's some names, right? Jaheim Bell for me is interesting as an athletic kind of do-it-all guy who took a lot of handoffs in his junior year, which is super interesting to kind of go back and have a look at. Jared Wiley, Eric All, Trey Knox, right? There's names here of guys, your guy, Devin Culp, right, on Washington. There's names here, but for me, I think we said it all with how we talked about Theo Johnson and Cade Stover. We're not expecting much out of 4 and 5. So really, for me, it's the top 2 or bust. Jatavian Sanders at his price, I'm probably out regardless of where he ends up. And then these other guys are just stashes. So no, I want to get Bowers if I can get my hands on him and it's reasonable. I want to get Sinnott if he's falling to the early 3rd. I think that's a smash for Sinnott. Otherwise, no. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind Eric All. He played in one of just the worst offenses you'll ever see. This is the stuff is you watch it and you're like, dude, what is going on here? Come on, can we figure this out? But that's the joy of the Iowa offense. By the way, if you want to just gouge your eyes out, I think that's more fun than watching the Iowa offense play. That is some ugly football. And I know they had good defense, but good God, it's 1950s. It's figure it out, Iowa. I don't want to have to do this with these guys. And I know you guys produce tight ends nonstop, but goodness, just give us a capable offense. That's all I'm asking from these guys. But yeah, I think Jaheim Bell is interesting, like you said. Eric All is interesting. These guys all have interesting upside, but the draft capital is going to play. There's Dallin Holkler, who's a decent, capable wide receiver. Limited, super limited with athleticism. So he's going, maybe he gets a role. You can talk about Tip Raymond, guy out of Illinois, who's a freak athlete, who doesn't believe birds are real. So that's a fun thing that you can talk about. I showed up at the combine and I was like, all right.
If you play in a fantasy points for are birds real or not league, then draft Tip Raymond at the 101 for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, Aaron makes a great point. Yeah, Aaron, you put us 2 knuckleheads talking about Ben Sinnott on here. What do you think about it? It's I'm talking about 2 dogs that love tight ends. Of course, I'm gonna love Cade Stover and Ben Sinnott. It's hello, yeah. And here's how Aaron has his top 5. He has it: Bowers, Sinnott, Sanders, Stover, Theo. Interestingly enough, I think Theo will probably get draft capital for sure. I'm not 100% sure on Stover or Sanders. I don't know. I just think someone's gonna chase that athleticism upside. But yeah, we all kind of agree. Sinnott's our tight end 2, and then 3 through 5, it's really your flavor. I'll let them decide what they want, but go look at these guys yourself. This is just kind of our take on what we think of the class in general. It's not the best tight end class in the world. It's not last year's class. Last year's class was far and away so much better than this year's class. We're talking about, you get Laporta, even Kincaid. You talk about these guys that fell in the 2nd round. I got Laporta 210 last year. I'm not getting a tight end, similar tight end at 210 this year. As much as I like Sinnott, I think Laporta is just a much better version of what he offers. So just don't be coming in this year oh yeah, tight end class was good last year. This year it's gonna be the same. No, it's not. It's not the same, folks. It's really not the same. I think there's a reason Bowers is far and away the tight end 1 of this class. He is what you want. I know Aaron's been kind of talking about taking the tight end 2 to the late 2nd. He prefers that. If you want to go that route, you can. But personally, if I'm taking one of these guys, yeah, I'm definitely taking Bowers. I'll just lock that in. That's what it is. So yeah. Yeah, we're basically doing a ton of stuff. So I could, hype it all up. But we got a couple weeks of the draft. We're going to be doing more mock drafts. I think we have something set up with who did you have something set up with the mock draft we're going to do coming up?
We got, it's not solidified yet, but it will be at some point when it's going to happen. But we got Tom Strachan, we got Pat Fitzmaurice, I believe. We got who else is there? Andrew Cooper, I think, is on the docket. So lots going on at the fantasy football universe. You can check us out everywhere. We're on TikTok. Obviously, we're on X. We're at fantasyfootballuniverse.com with over 100 profiles, both offense and IDP. If you're curious about who those IDP rookies are incoming and what kind of role they'll face, right? Dallas Turner, if he goes top 10, that guy's going to be a monster. Where is he worth drafting? So check us out. We're all over the map, and we're going to be, like Jesse mentioned, just cranking through the content for the next 3 weeks here until the draft.
The yardstick beer. I need a photo of that, Aaron. I want to see the yardstick beer.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, like I'm no IDP guy. That's Aaron. That's SC. They're the two guys that really do it. Like me and Jeremy know it, but like it's not our specialty. We'll be like, they'll ask me questions. I'm like, I know these guys. Like I like certain guys, but it's not my cup of tea. So yeah, we have a lot of good stuff coming out. But yeah, we look forward to like bringing you more content as we get into the nitty gritty after the NFL draft happens. We'll be all doing kind of our own individual shows on top of it too, along with our like weekly show that we have. So yeah, just like you're talking about, non-step content coming out from us. So like that's what we do. We're degenerates. That's the life we live, right? So I want to thank you all for coming in to our 2024, our rookie tight end rankings. And yeah, we'll look forward to doing some more stuff for you, and we'll see you later on this week.